Hey, it's Curly, and Season 3 of the Divines anime finally aired its last episode this past week, and while I have a bunch of thoughts of my own, I wanted to see what you guys thought of the season so far. So, first off, we have episode 1, which was a bit of a weird one because some people actually saw this on the strategy presentation where they aired the entire episode. Of course, it's a Japanese strategy presentation, so there was no English subs, so a lot of you had to just make do with different fights translations, live translations of the episode. Then when it came for the episode to actually air officially, it didn't actually air officially on time because the, I guess, publishing company of the band that did the opening song put a copyright strike on the video, so it actually didn't air, which was really funny. It didn't air until like the next day. It sucked for me because I was trying to organize a watch party for this season, and of course this would be the first episode of the watch party, and that did not work. Anyways, once the episode finally aired, it seems like you guys were, overall, whether you watched it like 3 or 4 or 5 times, who knows, you guys seem to like this episode pretty decently. Then, sort of a continuation of episode 1, we saw there basically just setting up the deluxe and then setting up a fight between Kagetsu, the new character, who happens to be Now's master, and then Akina. And this episode 2 was actually just the actual fight and then completing the setup for the deluxe. And you guys seem to like this one pretty decently as well. Makes sense. They were pretty decent episodes in terms of setting up what the rest of the season is going to be. Then, here's where things start getting interesting, because in episode 3, we had the first fight of the actual deluxe. And what I did is that before every episode, I would put up a poll, trying to get you guys to predict who would win the fight based on which fight was going to happen, thanks to the preview from the previous fight. And I tried to do these, later on I got it a little bit better, but I tried to do these before the episode aired, like on Thursdays in the morning. This one I aired, this one I put up like a little bit before the episode aired. So I feel like most of you probably voted after watching the episode. All that to say is only the real ones were here before the episode aired. That said, for the actual episode itself, I think this is the episode that you guys like the most. Giving you like an 84%. I won't do crazy statistics and base it on the number of votes, but just in terms of percentage, this seemed to be the episode that you guys liked the most, which is fair. It was a very good, strong, solid episode. Mita had a good showing. You got to see the tree for people that like trees, but Sagra looked great, and everything looked pretty good this episode, right? So can't say I disagree. Then we had the controversial, I want to say, episode 4, right? And this one was going to have Suzune, the brand new character, and Senka. So, most of you voted for Suzune, which I did look at these polls generally before the episode aired, so I have a good understanding of how it was before the episode and after the episode. People, whatever reason, want to come in and vote after that, right? Or they just see it afterwards. And understandably, Senka was a bit of the underdog here, mainly because a thread that we're going to see throughout the entire season basically is, we got to showcase this new deck, right? So the new deck kind of has priority over the older deck. And that ended up being kind of the case with Suzune showing off her new deck, Artisaria, which unveiled the lock mechanic coming to Lyrical Monasterio, much to the Vanguard community's complete meltdown, which may be why some of you didn't like this episode as much, but still nothing too crazy, with a lot of people just not liking that lock was back. Some people liking that lock was back. Some people thinking that lock was gonna end all of Vanguard again. Some people just hating women and upset that they have to deal with Lyrical Monasterio having their favorite mechanic. But other than that, it was an alright episode. It was pretty hyped to see Locke, even as I am Locke's biggest hater. It was a pretty fun episode, at least for me to watch. And this is also extremely true. Then we have ourselves here the very sort of tipping point, I feel like, for the season for most people, where we had Kyon versus Akina, a fight that we did not get last season, and we felt that the entire season would have ended up being, but they actually threw a curveball at us that last season, right? So here we actually get that fated showdown between the fated king and the destined king, with the vast majority of you thinking Akina was going to win, and that ended up being the case, with Kyon putting up a decent fight, but not being able to get the dub. And most of you, liked this episode pretty decently. I think it was a fair enough episode aside from Kyon losing, but overall I think it was pretty well constructed. It is ironically two of the best decks in that format at the time, minus, I guess, if you consider it set 6 and not set 7, considering set 7 wasn't out, but whatever. It was a good episode, it's fun to watch, and two characters are always good to see on screen. Though it is kind of silly how Kyon just refuses to use one of his best cards. Then, this one was the one that you guys were the most split on, I think. This one and a future one. Because next, for episode, I believe, 6, we had Now versus Erica. Two very, very popular characters for many players, and you guys were like almost split down the middle. I think before the episode aired, it was a lot closer. It was like 53 to now or something like that. But yeah, this one was a bit of a controversial one, I guess. A lot of people weren't too happy about this. Some people were. It was a whole mixed bag, because a lot of people, I feel like, throughout this season just really wanted Erica, or more specifically, not even wanted, expected Erica to do exceptionally well this season because of some underlying factors, such as the fact that she's in the entirety of the ending song and it features literally just her. So, fair play. I can understand why you think she'd have an important role this season, or I guess more specifically, the next season. But unfortunately, most of y'all were wrong, because Now did end up winning this. And overall, most of you seemed to like this episode decently well. I think it was a fun episode. It was a bit of a shame that Liel or Morta didn't really get any crazy support out of this fight, but at the same time, neither did Varga. So it was, it was an interesting fight where I guess they sort of showed off the new support, but it was kind of underwhelming. So it's more reliant on the strength of the characters and on the actual cards that were played. I do feel that it did do a good job of characterizing both of these, characters, right? Because Erica is in a weird spot where she kind of has to, one, develop as a character that really hasn't had a lot of screen time, but also, two, develop as a character that has a literal clone of her running around in the world. So she has to find a way to, stand out on top of all of that. And I feel like this episode did a pretty good job of, introducing us a little bit more into who she is, her motivations and whatnot, and kind of doing the same thing for Now as well. Of course, this episode also was the one that ended up off-screening a couple of characters, which was a bit of a shock when that happened. And I sort of poked fun at this, making 2 polls, even though we already knew who the winner were. Some of y'all understood the assignment. Some of y'all did not, but that is totally fine. This was pretty funny either way. But we ended up seeing Megami lose to Sho, and then seeing Haika lose to Kagetsu. Off screen, we just see the results of that fight, which is kind of interesting because this season was, I'll get into it in a little bit here, but I'll have a future video that goes into more detail. But this season of the Deluxe was leaps and bounds way better than the previous season, especially in terms of what they do off screen and on screen too. I think they did an exceptional job at that. But I've learned through this season that I feel like no matter what, people will be unhappy no matter what happens. Even if we had a season, I'm pretty sure if we had an entire season that was 52 episodes and it was just every single fight of the Deluxe, people would be unhappy because it would be boring. Even if we have a season that's 12 episodes and it's just pure fights, people will find it boring because there's no story plot. Even if we have an episode that is 12 seasons and they focus on the story and cut out all the fights, people will be upset because a lot of the fights are cut out. So, people are just going to be unhappy no matter what, but it is what it is. Then we had a break between this episode and the next one, so I wanted to ask and go over 2 things. First things first is we got the reveal of what we will later on know to be Ruka, but I was wondering what you guys thought about this because she was kind of mentioned in like a flashback, or not even a flashback, just an image, right? And we had no idea who this character was. The fuck? I actually really thought that throughout this was originally I thought it was Kagetsu's original master who struggled with, I guess, figuring out how to play Vanguard, and then they just died. That was my thought process. Turns out I was completely wrong with that. The fuck? Then we had what I guess you guys would consider a filler fight, but I thought it was pretty important, which was Taizo versus Michiru. This was a non-deluxe fight, and it was just to sort of, in that episode, explain what happened to Michiru, go into what he's been doing this entire time while everyone was doing their whole fated thing, and like setting him up for the next season. And this is probably the least liked episode, which is pretty interesting from you guys, that you just did not like this episode. I don't know if it's because you don't like Michiru, or you don't like the fact that it deviated from the deluxe, or what it was. I thought it was fine, you know. It was interesting to see how Michiru recovered from his coma and, you know, doing his thing and getting up to speed and getting into the deluxe and all that stuff. I feel like that was a necessary episode, so I don't really understand the hate for it, but I guess it wasn't the strongest episode either. Which, like, I guess you guys just thought it was mid, but like, that's fine. But you guys just didn't love it, which is, I guess, whatever. This was interesting though, just the thought of, instead of having Taizo, having one of the other characters, maybe another character that's like in the deluxe fight. And that would have been interesting, because they could have done something, for example, with Sophie Bell. They could have used her because they had the new Unica that was in the new Alma Jester that was in set 7. So they definitely could have done product placement with that, especially considering that Taizo does have new cards in set 8 that he ended up not even using in that fight. So that would have been interesting. Them showing someone from the actual current deluxe that we're having. So if like they're trying to set up, let's say, this fight between Akina and Michiru, having them fight here would have been kind of interesting. They could have also done something like with any of the other characters that maybe haven't had that much screen time. Maybe they could have even thrown Erika into the mix here, right? Because a loss against Michiru really wouldn't hurt her. If she did well against Michiru, I feel like that would actually build her up. And she does have the connection with Taizo, who obviously knows Michiru, so he could have easily set that up. So that would have been something interesting to think about. I don't know if the season or the episode would have been better because of that fight. Maybe it could have been. Then I asked what you guys thought, now that the first round of the deluxe was done, how we thought this tournament was going to play out so far. And yeah, a lot of you didn't like that the characters got off screen, but like I said, it was kind of a necessary evil. I think two things. First of all, I think that the sort of like palette cleanser and the like change of pace with this Michiru episode was much needed, because if we just had fight, it's going to be a very boring, sort of monotonous season. So I think the change of pace was necessary. Two, because of that, to make it not monotonous and just be fight, we have to have some of these fights off screen, which makes sense, especially considering that once you show off a deck, you don't really need to see it a second time for the most part. There's not really, unfortunately, that much variety that they can show in the fights, or at least they're willing to do so. So I think we're better off, unfortunately, not seeing these fights. Then we had this one, which was for, I believe, episode 8? Yeah, we should be up to episode 8, which was Megumi versus Suzune, back into the deluxe here. So this one was a bit of a very important one, right? Because Megumi has just gotten the short end of the stick constantly. And she continued that into the Divines, right? Her only on-screen match being against Mikoto and then losing to Mikoto. Then we go to season 3 and she gets off-screened. So Megumi fans in shambles here. And here against Suzune, who is a new character that they're building up, surely she would not beat her. But that ended up being not the case. She actually ended up winning, and I feel like it was a really good episode for Megumi. She kind of really needed a definitive win, and it definitely wasn't a loss that hurts Suzune's character. It sort of added more to her character, if anything. And I think you all agreed. I think this was the most liked episode out of all of them. So far it was episode 3 with Mita, and then now episode 8 was the episode you guys liked the most, which is fair. It was a good episode, right? We got some development, we got some sort of plot with Suzune and whatnot, as well as the show. We got Megumi to actually win and turn fucking Super Saiyan. Super cool. And I'm glad that it dispelled some of the doubt that Megumi haters had for no reason. Then we had this come up afterwards, the other off-screen character, which was Raika, right? So he lost to Kagetsu off-screen, which upset a lot of people because they wanted to see the new youth, and they feel like their GOAT is washed and he just got off-screen and he's on the Megumi level. Then he has a fight here against the main character of the entire series. But a lot of y'all are faithful to fucking youth. I ain't gonna deny it. Even against Akina, you guys overwhelmingly thought Raika was gonna win. Especially considering that, we're still expecting another fight between him and Michiru, with Michiru not being like CPU Michiru or whatever. So, fair enough. And that is what ended up happening with Raika actually getting the win. With this being, I guess, the third most liked episode. I forgot how much the media one has, but you guys really liked this episode a lot, which is fair. It was a decent enough episode. It was also a bit controversial as well, because during this time, Set 7 was out in Japan, and a lot of people were seeing the few results that we had from Japan, and kind of freaking out, thinking that Buff Sakura was the strongest thing that ever existed, and it's going to ruin the game. And then they revealed Youthberg that can kind of do similar power levels to Buff Sakura, and again, kind of lost, started doom posting about how Youthberg is horrible and they're too strong in terms of horrible, and it's gonna ruin the game, and then all that jazz. And then now, Youthberg is really not seeing any play. It is 2-4. Then next we had the second least favorite episode for you guys. Seems like you guys just want pure fights and don't want any story. Interesting. This is episode 10, where we got Kagetsu's backstory. I feel a lot of people felt that this was underwhelming in terms of the motivations for Kagetsu being who he is. I feel like it was fine, right? I think it explained it fine enough. Having, a memorable fight and not being able to do that again, I think is enough for someone to no longer want to fight competitively, especially for something like Vanguard, where it's a bit of a, toss-up when you fight competitively. So I felt like, I feel like I jived for this episode a lot more than you guys did. At this point, wanted to see how you guys are feeling about the Deluxe with only 3 fights or 4 fights? No. 8 fights? Left. Try to see how you guys are feeling about what's about to come. And again, a lot of you seem to really think that Erika was going to play a big role in this season. One, because of the fact that she got an ending, but also I feel like not just this person in particular, but a lot of you were harping on the fact that she got a new chibi, which is used for the Cockmillion segment at the end of the episode, and expected that to be used this season. But like, they could use that whenever they want. They don't have to use that this season, right? They could use it next season, which is what ended up going to be happening. But she did not get a full fight against Gui to sort of redeem herself. She just ended up winning off screen. Spoilers for the next episode, I guess. We have some predictions here. This one was unfortunately very wrong, because Nao did not make it through, and neither did Aika. But this is kind of the prediction that I had as well. Whereas this one was actually right on the nose. Then we had the second to last fight, full fight of the season here with episode 11 with Sho versus Suzune. One of the fights that I feel like they've set up the most throughout the entire season. And I feel like Sho had the most development and was the most interesting character in this entire season, even considering he's a man of few words for the most part, right? But yeah, Suzune was in a weird one here because she had already lost one. She won one. And considering she's a new character, a lot of people kind of expected her to do something. But she just ends up losing here to Sho. He uses Talk no Jutsu, and he breaks the chains of her Link Jokerness in her family. And her mom is just okay with it immediately. I'll get more into it later on, but I feel like they could have dragged this out a bit more, gotten a bigger payoff, but it was kind of just like, oh, I got washed twice. I guess I'll just be a nice person now, or be more social, or whatever the heck it was. This episode was also kind of funny because it actually aired without English subs, which was a bit awkward. Again, having a watch party, and then I'm like, oh great, I guess we can't fucking watch what's going on.
Well, or understand, I should say, which is why I kind of, I guess, trolled you guys and I put the poll this time in Japanese, right? But you guys seem to also really like this episode a lot. Then we had the penultimate episode here, and we had the last couple of fights which should have been resolved. I was under the impression, of course, that it was going to be Kagetsu versus Akina for 2 fights like they've done every single season. Some of y'all had different impressions, but either way, for each of these fights, I asked what you guys would think. And you had some interesting thoughts here. We thought Gui was going to get washed again, which fair enough. Thought Megumi was going to get the win here, with a little bit of percent of maybe Seneca getting the dub. Then for Laika versus Kyung, you guys were actually super conflicted on this one. I think this one was actually 50-50 before the episode, where like right down the line, which was kind of insane. And then, you know, they just got a little bit more for Kyung, again, possibly people voting after they watched the episode. But this one was very interesting and also was very deciding for how the season was going to go, because if Kyung had lost, he of course would have gone 0-3, which would have sucked for him and his character, but also Raika would have had 2 wins, automatically qualifying him for the next round. So that put us in a weird situation where we would have to have a lucky draw between Akina and Kagetsu if Akina wins, but if he loses, he instantly cannot go through. Then the last one, of course, was Kagetsu versus Akina. And I gave you guys 2 chances for this, and both times you guys thought that Akina was going to end up winning. Overall, you guys didn't really like this episode too much. I don't know what it is about it. I guess maybe the pacing was I feel like it was fine, personally. But with that said, we'll move on to episode 13, which was the last episode of the season. And throughout the season, we've had this sort of rumor or superstition, I don't know what you want to call it, but every single character that was featured on a thumbnail this season would actually end up losing for the deluxe fights, right? The exception being Michiru, who was actually featured as a thumbnail, but that was a non-deluxe fight. And then they had Tomare as one of the thumbnails, and she was not involved in the fight. And for this last episode, they had Akina as a thumbnail. So whether or not this was on purpose or not is really funny. If they did this on purpose and then for the last episode they put Akina to like subvert expectations, masterful work if that's true. I highly doubt they thought that far ahead. But in the end, Akina actually ended up winning against Kagetsu, and it was a pretty good fight, to be honest. It subverted some of my expectations twice, one of them in a good way, one of them in not such a good way. And we got to see who is actually going to advance into the next season, essentially for the top 8 cut. And you guys seem to like this, episode pretty decently. I have another poll that's going to come out that's going to go over how you guys felt about the entire season, but I don't have that available yet because I'm spacing that out. But until that poll comes out, please let me know in the comments down below what you thought overall about the entire season, which was your favorite fight or maybe your least favorite episode. And I'll have my own thoughts in a bigger video somewhere down the line. But until then, take care of yourselves and each other, play Vanguard, and have yourselves a damn good one.